So I think that's important to keep in mind is that there are ways to connect. I mean, even doing this, as tired as we are all of Zoom, even doing this tonight I'm really enjoying this, and this is a nice way to connect with people. So I think it's important to maintain your connection as much as possible, whether it's virtual, whether it's a physical distance outside, if you're comfortable with that level of risk, and trying to find ways to stay connected.
Welcome to the LubDub Show, brought to you by the Providence Heart to Start program in the Oregon Brewery Running Series. The LubDub is a weekly podcast and interactive video show where we get to talk to experts about all things running and walking, and also hear from some Heart to Start program champions who provide motivation and inspiration for all of us as we embark on this 12-week journey and begin 2021 as a community united in becoming our best, healthiest selves. My name is Nathan Freeberg. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. I'm the co-founder of the Oregon Brewery Running Series, and since 2016, we have been hosting untimed, family-friendly 5K fun runs that start at different breweries all over Oregon and Southwest Washington. We have built this awesome, wonderful community, much like you have here at the Heart to Start program, which is one of many reasons why I am so excited to be partnering with you on this journey, and also our goal event in February. I can't believe it, but this is already week 4 of the LubDub show. Be sure that you go back and listen to last week's episode. Coach Mike shared some inspirational thoughts to help motivate all of us as we continue our training, and Eric Marchek, who is a PT and the clinical operations manager for the Providence Sports Medicine program, he gave us some really, really helpful tips about stretching and active recovery. I know the last week I have actually been using some of those things, so it's really helpful. If you're wondering about that, go back and check it out. Tonight, we're going to be talking with Dr. Ted Foster, who is a cardiologist with Providence Heart Institute. He's based out of Newburgh. He's going to be stopping by to say hello and just inspiring all of us. He is the program champion for the Willamette Valley Heart to Start program, and I believe they kicked off their first season just last year in 2019. So I know that they're probably really excited to get back to normal. And then later, Dr. Catherine Slys, a clinical psychologist with the Providence Medical Group, she's going to be sharing some invaluable information about emotional well-being, including tips and tools for training without the in-person group support I know that we've all been used to. I know I'm certainly not as motivated as I normally am right now when it comes to, well, a lot of things, but especially, going after my health and fitness goals. And she's also going to incorporate mindfulness and self-acceptance into that conversation as well. And we did a little pre-interview, and I'm really excited. I'm going to try really hard not to monopolize the whole conversation with my own personal questions. But before we get to any of that, Tracy Rose, I would love to invite you. She is our program coordinator, does all the behind the scenes work, sends you a million emails. She's really on top of it all. Tracy, what announcements do you have for us this evening?
Hello. I've got a few, so I'm going to go through them, but in order, I kind of made it fun since I have a few to do. There's some trivia and prizes involved, so pay attention. We do want to say thank you to everyone that registered. We ended up closing registration today, just making sure last few people as we went into week 4 were able to join us. And what I want to do is share that number, but I want people to get involved. So as I'm talking, I want you to put into the chat how many people you think registered. And we've given some little teasers along the way, so you do a little bit of math and guess what that number is. And what we found, and I'll share that number here in a few minutes, but what we found is that there's a definite need for programs like this. And we're super humbled by the number of people that turned out. Again, we're across 18 states and 2 countries. And so we're super excited to have everyone join us in their own way. And that's what's neat about this program is we offer you some great guidelines and support, but we want you to make this your own where you are, especially right now. So I will get to the number in a minute. I'll let you guys key those in. I will say the week 4 email went out. And if you didn't get that, please let me know. We've been sending them out. And the new format, since the numbers grew so large, I broke the email. So we couldn't send them that way anymore. So please take a look at that. There's a super important t-shirts. And if you've been around this program long enough, t-shirts are a coveted item. You collect them every year. You want them. It's the most popular question we're asked. We're super grateful. The Providence Heart Institute has supported us on this and wants everyone in this program to have a t-shirt. So it requires a little bit of a different distribution. So there's a survey. Please complete that and let us know your size. Let us know where you are so we can get that to you before the end of the season. So you can wear it for your goal event and wear it toward the end of the season when we have a fun Go Red day. There's another prize involved. Everyone that gets theirs completed within the next 24 hours will be entered to win a free goal race entry. So please go in, follow that link, get your information submitted so that we can begin to get those all coordinated. The other piece I want to share, and Nathan can kind of add on to this toward the end, the goal event registration is open. We opened it today. It is in your week 4 email. We invite you to participate. It is an addition to our 12-week training program, but it's kind of what we're all working together to lead up to. And we've always chosen in every one of our programs a community event to support and be part of. And so we are so grateful and excited that Nathan and Drew with Oregon Brewery Running Series has put together an amazing virtual event that you will find will come to every one of your states. You will find a way to participate. It doesn't matter where you are. There is going to be a super amazing interaction and opportunity, no matter if you're in Oregon or Kentucky or Texas or Alaska or Canada. There's great interaction that we've built a great program with them, and we're super excited to be able to offer that out. So get registered. There's a promo code that's in your week 4 email. Use it. It's for a discount off of the regular rate, and we want everyone to join us for that great event. So back to the numbers. I'll look through the chat because I don't want to take up all the time, but the final count was 2,001. 2,001 participants registered. We're so thankful, sincerely grateful, and we're just going to enjoy the rest of the season with all of you guys. Thanks, Nathan.
2001, that's crazy. Last week, it was like 1,800 something. So that's amazing, Tracy. Okay, our first guest tonight is Dr. Ted Foster. Dr. Foster is a cardiologist with the Providence Heart Institute based out of Newburgh, and this is your second year as a program champion, is that right?
That is true, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, just to start, how are you doing tonight? It looks like you might be at your home right now.
I am. So if 2 boys break in and a wrestling match ensues around me, you will know what is happening.
Please do not stop any of that because...
Oh, no. It'll be great. It'll be great.
If any of my children break in as well. I'm in a closet right now, by the way.
I see. It's nice.
Yeah, so I could talk a lot about how this came to be, but it's my solution from hiding from my children. So Dr. Foster, you're an Oregon native. I'm reading your bio here. You're a baseball guy. You're a big fan of the Red Sox.
Oh, yeah. So I am a native Oregon. Oh, yeah, okay. So I'm a native Oregonian. In a former life, played some baseball, and I happened to play with some people who played on the Red Sox. And became fans. It also, I will point out my dad is a Yankees fan, and maybe that talks about our relationship a little bit. But
wow.
Also, Tracy is a Yankees fan, so that also explains a lot of that.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm a diehard lifelong Cubs fan, so you and I could maybe
we can relate then.
Relate to Theo Epstein, breaking of curses, all of that. But that's not what we're here to talk about tonight, as much as I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Just give us a glimpse about who are you not as a cardiologist when you're not, pumping people's hearts and telling us to stop eating things that aren't healthy for us. What do you do? That's mainly what you do. Okay. Give us an insight.
My main outside of work, so I have 2 small boys. They are 5 and almost 9. And if I don't say almost 9, he will get mad. In normal non-COVID times, I'm usually shuttling them to sports. We play sports kind of year round, and my weekends are kind of filled with that. These days, we find ourselves outside a lot in various ways. If I was not a cardiologist and I didn't make it as a professional baseball player, I'd probably be a photographer of some kind. So that's the other thing that I like to do outside of work.
That's great. Well, being a photographer and having young kids, I'm sure you have some amazing images captured of these precious years. So
I do, yeah.
that's really cool. You want to come over to our house and help us out with that?
Sure.
So I'm curious, why did you get involved with this? With Heart to Start, like what inspired you? What made you think, I got two young kids, I got a demanding job. I want something else to add to that.
Dr. Beckerman and Tracy held me against my will. That's
it then. Perfect. All right, next question.
No, in reality, it was a fascinating, different aspect to interacting with patients on a level that I was just not used to doing. And to give you kind of an example of what last year looked like for me and why I kind of ended up loving it more. One, I broke my ankle immediately before the season started. So I started wheeling around the track on my little scooter, and that was awesome. But the other thing that I loved and kind of the community aspect is my son's soccer practice was literally happening simultaneously on the field while I was leading around this group around the track, which was, I think, just this great poetic thing of here, look at this community. I'm here with not only my son who's practicing soccer, but these amazing people who want to join me in making themselves healthier. It was just a great thing.
That's really cool. I can totally relate to that. It's fun when you can do activities with your kids that are also really good for them, right?
Yes.
And maybe it kind of instill some lifelong values that they can hopefully, latch onto and use. So how would you encourage people? Like, let's say you're with your group in Newburgh, out on the track or whatever you're doing, just pretend that that's the setting. Like, leave us with maybe a word of encouragement or motivation as we're all, we're kind of in that almost to the middle point, kind of the middle third, if you will, of this 12-week journey. Maybe it's getting a little difficult. What might you leave us with that can help us keep going to the end of this?
So the start of this will not sound motivational, and here's the start to this. I hate running. I'm a former athlete, and growing up, I was more naturally gifted and just frankly didn't have to work for athletics. As I went through school and all of that, I was more and more and more sedentary. I then realized when I had my first son that I could barely keep up. I wasn't like tremendously out of shape, but it was just shocking to me. Like wheeling him in a stroller was exercise, and I wasn't doing anything. And I realized that I better get with it. I still hate running. I'm sorry if running is your thing. I'm sorry, but I've realized that if I don't run, how one mentally it affects me. When I broke my ankle and I couldn't run last year, my wife was like, you're just grumpy right now. And I was like, I think it's because I'm not getting this out. I'm not running. I'm not whatever. And so my mornings normally start like, I hate what I'm doing right now. But by the time I get home, which I'm an outside runner, I run all year round in the weather and whatever and that entails in Oregon. It's amazing how much better I feel. And that's what it's hard to convey to people. It may make you grumpy and unhappy to do it, but the benefit you get afterwards, that feeling, that whatever it is just unbelievable. I was talking with a patient today, and he was describing his day-to-day activities. And he works a swing shift, and he works night shift, and he's like, I just can't find time to do it. And we were trying to brainstorm when he could do this. And I know there's a lot of science behind when you should exercise and when you shouldn't, and should you do it in the morning, should you do it at night? And for this fellow who has this chaotic schedule, it was more about, it doesn't matter when it's scientifically good to do it. You just need to find 20 minutes for yourself to do it, whenever that is. It doesn't matter when it is. You got to find time to do it.
I love almost everything about what you said, but I appreciate the part about hating running, because I think sometimes we think that we have to be these, these super runner people that love this, they love the grind, they love whatever, and that's fine if that's you, but I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability in sharing that. And I hope the folks that are listening to this either live here tonight or after the fact can be like, hey, okay, it's okay if I don't like this. I have a similar thing. My son, he's like, Dad, I don't like broccoli. I was like, I don't either. It's disgusting, but it's so good for you. So just choke it down, and it's going to be okay.
Right.
So yeah. Well, Dr. Foster, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I hope we can all learn from that and really take from that as we keep going on this journey. So any final thoughts? Any other words of wisdom before we go here?
No, I'm happy to be a part of it. It's such a great organization. It's such a great community that's here. It's just phenomenal. It's so impressive that it's spread so far, and it couldn't come at a better time than now.
Yeah, it's one of those little, I think, unintended good consequences, perhaps, of this pandemic here. So
100%. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Dr. Foster. Appreciate it. Maybe in other times we can go for a run and talk baseball and some other cool stuff like that. So our next guest is Dr. Slys, Dr. Catherine Slys. Dr. Slys is an Ohio native, and she spent her youth in Southern California, which we will try not to hold against her. And when she's not helping her patients to identify their values and help them create lives that reflect those values, Dr. Slys is a hiker, a runner, a stand-up paddleboarder, which is really cool, something that I got into this summer, and just sounds like a lover of all things. So, Dr. Slys, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great, Nathan. It's nice to be here. I, for the record, love running and broccoli, so you can hold that against me as well.
Oof. Well, you are a better person than us. I got to be honest with you. I'm feeling a little tense, a little stressed. It's been kind of a long day with the kids. Yeah. I don't know if anyone can relate to that. But I'm wondering if, before we get into any of this, do you have, I don't know, anything that might just sort of help me kind of relieve some of that tension, or just take a beat? I can look at my heart rate here is going a little faster. I don't know. You got anything?
Yeah, gosh, Monday at the end of the workday, it's a good time to take a little bit of a break and kind of de-stress. I'd love to walk you through a quick little breathing exercise. This is good for just de-stressing in the moment after you've had a moment, or it's good we use it for people who have depression and anxiety. We use it for people with chronic health conditions as well. It's something called diaphragmatic breathing. And so what you're doing is you're using a muscle called your diaphragm down below your lungs to kind of draw the air fully into your lungs. And what it's going to look like, if you were to put a hand on your chest and then another hand on your belly, you would notice that the hand on your belly is going to go up and down, or out and in rather, kind of like there's a balloon in your belly. And the hand on your chest should stay relatively still. You want to try to draw that air into your belly, almost like you're pushing out through your belly. And when you want to breathe in, you want to breathe in through your nose, into the belly. Little pause, and then a nice long exhale through the mouth, nice and slow. Perfect. Go ahead and do one more of those. And this time when you're exhaling, just relax your eyes and your jaw and your shoulders down so that we're getting that full relaxation effect. Sometimes when we're stressed out, our muscles are like really tense, and we want to consciously relax them. And so we're just bringing our attention and our awareness to our breathing and our muscles in that moment. How is that feeling?
I like that. That's good. I've never kind of paid attention to what's moving before when I'm breathing. That's an interesting activity.
I will say it doesn't always feel intuitive. When we're born, that's how we breathe naturally. Sometimes we lose that over time. So I would say a good tip is if you're trying it out and you're not able to get that belly to go out and in, try it when you're lying down, because it can be easier to kind of access the muscle that way.
That's very helpful. I'm gonna try to incorporate that perhaps a few times throughout my day. So thank you.
It's a great thing to do throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And we're going to talk more about how that fits in to kind of the rest of this topic. But in maybe like 30 or 60 seconds, who are you? Can you give us a brief bio of kind of who you are and why you're perhaps qualified to talk to us about breathing and mindfulness? Yeah,
so I'm a clinical psychologist with a background in health psychology. I work for Providence as what's called a behavioral health provider. This means that I work as part of people's medical team. So when they come into their primary care doctor and they're not feeling great emotionally, or if they're struggling to cope with a physical condition or find motivation to be healthier, they come to see me to work on those small achievable goals.
Wow, that sounds like maybe a busy job right now, or perhaps always.
Yes, yeah, it's always quite busy, and particularly this past year, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's kind of dive in here, but I'm wondering if we can maybe define some terms, just kind of lay the table, set the table, if you will, for this topic. Because I think when it comes to mental health, emotional health, well-being, there's perhaps a little, I don't know, stigma around that, or people might wonder, like, what does that have to do with running and walking? And so what is it? What are we talking about? And then we'll dive into some more of our specific questions.
Yeah, so when we think about mental health, it's more than just your emotional well-being. Mental health is the health of your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. Speaking of being motivated and training and doing all that, it also takes into consideration your social health. So how are you doing with all your relationships with people? So, when you're mentally healthy, you feel good, you maybe have some flexibility in those thoughts and emotions, so that even if you're not feeling great in that moment, that you're okay with it. And so when we think about our mental health, when we're not feeling great, that really impacts how we're behaving. When you're not feeling great, sometimes maybe we're feeling a little bit less motivated or things like that. Maybe we don't eat as healthy or do those things that we know are important for us to be healthy. So it's all very interrelated.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you mentioned relationships and motivation. The Heart to Start program, the Oregon Brew Running Series, they're social programs. They're designed to bring people together in community to either just have fun, to be active, to give back to a cause. And, we're doing this via screens tonight, and that's like primarily how we're interacting right now. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, I'm going to ask you a few different questions at once, I think, which is bad interviewing technique. But as a psychologist, you're used to kind of sifting through people's nonsense, perhaps. How do we find motivation right now? How do we perhaps take care of, the mental side of our lives and figure out, like, how do I stay motivated, not isolated, but just kind of figure out, like, what do social interactions look like right now? Does that make sense? I'm like blending a few of the things we talked about together, but.
Yeah, well, I think they can kind of boil it down to like the social connection piece and motivation, and there's some overlap there. The social connection, the piece that you're talking about there, training in a format where you don't have that group of people is a really interesting thing. I think that one of the unfortunate things about this pandemic is this term social distancing. This notion that we need to be socially distant somehow. In reality, what they're talking about is physical distancing. And so I think that's important to keep in mind, is that there are ways to connect. I mean, even doing this, as tired as we are all of Zoom, even doing this tonight I'm really enjoying this, and this is a nice way to connect with people. So I think it's important to maintain your connection as much as possible, whether it's virtual, whether it's a physical distance outside, if you're comfortable with that level of risk, and trying to find ways to stay connected. I think that social media is a double-edged sword when it comes to that. And, yes, we might be connecting with our loved ones on social media, but I'm sure you've heard of this term, like the doom scrolling also, that people are doing, right? And we are all subject to that. So I think, trying to find ways to connect, whether it's by phone or virtual or whatever that is, connecting on social media, but maybe limiting that a little bit. And then, also using this as an opportunity to look inward. We've all been through difficult things in the past. We've never been through anything like this before, but we can use this time to think about those things that we've overcome in the past and how we did it and how great it felt, and to use this time as a time for growth, as difficult as it may be. And then I think the other thing that you were kind of asking about was this notion of motivation, and how do we stay motivated without that social connection, right? And the science of motivation is really interesting. There's a lot that goes into it. I think that one of the things that's really relevant here is this notion that motivation can kind of be contagious. And when we're with a group of people, even if we weren't feeling super excited about that run, like Dr. Foster, when we're with people, sometimes it's easier you see somebody else running and they're having a jolly good time of it. Then you're like, oh yeah, okay, maybe this isn't so bad. And so I think the question becomes, how do we, like, what else motivates us besides that? And maybe you do want to find a buddy if you're doing this program. Maybe you want a buddy who can do it with you, and whether it's even if you're not doing it in person, just kind of an accountability partner or somebody to say, hey, I did this run today and it was great. That's one way to do it. Or to also look inward, to look for that, what we call intrinsic motivation, which is motivation that comes from within versus an external motivation. An external motivation might be like getting someone's approval or, getting your best time or whatever that is. The internal motivation might be, like I'm doing this for my health, or I'm doing this because I want to have fun, or I'm doing this because it feels good after the run, or for me, it feels good during the run, whatever that might be, and trying to find what your reasons for motivation are. I think in the midst of all of that, a good trick to kind of think about is that, a lot of athletes use visualization activities and exercises to be their best self. And I think even just visualizing yourself having a good time running, feeling good afterwards, can be something that motivates you and can help you get out there and do it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it makes me think of several other ones. How do you do all that? And I guess what I'm specifically thinking about is that intrinsic motivation. Like, I know that you work with patients around like discovering their personal values and making sure that they're living out of those. So is there anything that you might be able to leave us with or share of like, here's perhaps a way to, I don't know, look at some values or kind of figure out what that thing is? Going back to Dr. Foster talking about he started running so that he could keep up with his kids, and in a lot of ways that's perhaps what I'm doing and some other things too. And so, when you frame it that way, it's like, oh yeah, those days I don't want to get out of bed, those days that it's pouring rain, but I only have a 30-minute window and I have to do it. Oh yeah, remember I gotta keep up with Parker when he's, running across the soccer field. Like what? I guess I'm just really curious about any like specific takeaways that might help us as we're, perhaps that message resonated with someone and like, but how do I do that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, what you're talking about with values is exactly what I do with my patients. We identify what's important to them. And so maybe taking a moment to write out what your values are, list them out, and how does running or walking fit into that? A good kind of self-assessment tool would be to keep track of your activities during the day and say, does this go towards my values or away from my values? And, I said I was going to incorporate self-acceptance into this, and this is where that comes into place, because there are times when we're doing stuff that goes away from our values. And when we are getting down on ourselves and beating ourselves up for, I didn't do that run today, or I didn't do that thing that was really important to do, and then we feel bad about it, that's going to further take us away from our values. So, nobody's perfect 100% of the time, and we're not shooting for perfection here. So if you can be aligned with your values some of the time, maybe most of the time, that's pretty good. And when you're not aligned with your values, to make sure that you are allowing for some grace and for self-acceptance in that moment so that you're not feeling further deterred from it. I mean, this time of year, this 2020 is so difficult. We've all had the roller coaster of emotions, which in some way are good. Even, the good and the bad emotions, they're all good emotions. We need them all. And so if you're having days that aren't great, be kind to yourself in that moment. And then focus on what can I do tomorrow that's aligned with my values.
I like that. I sometimes talk about like the 51% rule when, working towards your value. So if I can just be at 51%, meaning I'm doing it more often than I'm not doing it, I feel like that's progress, because you're right. You can't be perfect. You can't always, live up to these high expectations or whatever. And if you, start beating yourself up about it, then you're just going to be starting back at square one. So when we think about this topic, and I know that we're kind of putting a few different kind of maybe ideas together, but this is all mental health. This is all figuring out how to take care of, I guess, the non-physical parts of us, if you will, if that's accurate. When we think about that, are there any signs or, like if you're running along or walking along and you have a pain, you're like, oh, I should probably pay attention to that a little bit more. I should, ice it or stretch it, or, if it gets really bad, go to see a doctor. Is there anything similar for our mental health that we need to pay attention to, like signs where we can say, you know what, this thing, I'm perhaps beating myself up more than I should be. I'm, maybe moving into areas of shame or some other stuff. Like how do we know when, those proverbial aches and pains are something that we actually need more help to kind of figure out?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying that sometimes some physical pains can be a sign of some mental health issues. Our gut and our body is so intimately connected with our brains and our emotions. And we have an emotion, this chemical cascade of events goes on in our bodies. And so a stomach ache or a headache or an ache somewhere in the body, for many people, that is an expression of stress or anxiety or depression or whatever it may be. But pay attention to that, because it could be something else as well. So that's one indication. And then the other thing to think about, again, is to go back to your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior. So pay attention to your thoughts. If you're finding that you're just being way more negative than what's normal for you, that's a good indication that you might need some love and support. If your feelings are changing, if you're feeling depressed, not just sad, some sadness is normal, but depressed, it's lasting for days or weeks on end, anxiety, that's lots of worry, that's lasting longer than what's normal for you. Those are indications that you might need a little bit extra help. You also want to look at your behaviors. So changes in your behaviors, changes in sleep, changes in eating behavior, reduced appetite or an increase in appetite, other behaviors, turning to things like alcohol or substances to kind of cope as a way of coping with stress. It's an indication that it's like, what else can we do to kind of cope with that stress besides that? And then sometimes drinking a bunch more coffee in the morning as a way to kind of cope with the alcohol the night before. Those are good indications. And again, there's no shame in any of that. This is just, hey, these are changes that we're noticing about ourselves in the moment, and how can we love on ourselves, or how can we get some love and support? And what that support might look like, it sort of depends. If you feel like a friend is what you need, or somebody that you trust and care about, talking to them. If you feel like you need more support than that, if it's been going on for longer than a couple of weeks and it doesn't seem like it's getting better, talking to your doctor, finding a therapist. Psychologytoday.com is a great website for finding a therapist. And you can search by your area for that. And then one big warning sign would be thoughts of suicide. I like to always touch on that one as well. It's not someone that's, not everybody likes to talk about. And so there is the National Suicide Hotline, which I can put in the chat when we're done, but it's 800-273-8255, or it's 800-273-TALK is the other way to remember that. So reaching out for support when you need it. And I know that sometimes it can be difficult to do, to reach out for support. Sometimes we don't want to admit that, oh, something's wrong with me, but it takes strength and courage to get support. So it is not a weakness to reach out for that support when you need it. It is in fact an amazing strength.
I always find it interesting when people view like getting help as some sort of sign of weakness. Like, oh, I can do it all myself. I don't need help. I can do this. That seems crazy to me. I have kind of two questions that came in. Do you have anything like reading suggestions this person's asking to deal with internal motivation, or perhaps motivation in general? Any books or blogs?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think it's a personal question too. I think that there might not be something specific to motivation. I think, let's think about the way I would answer that question is, what tends to motivate you individually? What brings you joy? What in the moment when you're doing it, do you feel super excited, motivated about? I would seek out things that relate to that. And, you know, for me personally, like I love like Brene Brown's podcast and, like Oprah's Super Soul Conversation. Like those are for me the things that kind of motivate me. I like those kind of inward, introspective kind of things, of course, being a psychologist, right? So I tend to kind of tend towards those things. But yeah, if I can find anything else on motivation specifically, maybe related to finding that motivation for training or something along those lines, I can bring that back to you.
Yeah, I would love that. I can't reach it, but I've got 3 Brene Brown books up there. I'm a big fan, so I appreciate that you dropped that. Seasonal,
so cool.
Yeah, she's the best, right? Seasonal effectiveness disorder. Someone asked about that.
Yep. So I would say, you know, prepare for if it's something that you know that happens to you. What I tend to do with my patients is that we are very proactive about like what's going to help you get through that season. Is it walking in the middle of the day or doing your workout in the middle of the day? Is that something that you can do? Is it getting, they do sell lights that you can get to have that light exposure, which is an effective technique for some people. We don't want people with certain conditions doing that. For most people, it is appropriate. And, you know, just trying to make sure that you are engaging with those things like our normal coping tools or things that are going to make you feel lifted and well. And again, to allow for some level of, yeah, it gets dark at 4 p.m. or whatever, and that sucks and that feels gross. But, you know, what else can I do to make sure that we're getting those feel good, you know, hormones? When we're running and when we're walking, we're getting endorphins that are going to combat those kinds of sad feelings. But definitely talk to your doctor if the depression, what seasonal affective disorder essentially is depression, you know, during these winter months. And so it may be something that you need to talk to your doctor about if it gets to that point.
That's really helpful. What would you recommend for anybody who might psych themselves out? And I think the idea is like, oh, next week's run or walk or whatever is going to be really hard. I don't think I can do that because this one was so hard. Almost like, you know, kind of that doom and gloom thing. I was going to try to quote Brene because she has a term for that. I can't think of it. But when you're sort of like catastrophizing something, perhaps, if that's what that is.
What I would say is set small goals for yourself, for one. So setting a short period of time, like let's say you feel like you need to get your 20-minute run or your 30-minute run in and you're feeling like, I don't want to do that. It's too long or whatever it is. Go ahead and set a goal for only doing 5 or 10 minutes that day. And, you know, something is better than nothing. We talked about earlier, we don't need perfection all the time, right? Better to get that 5 minutes in or to walk instead of run, even if that's all you're doing. The other thing, what was I going to say? I'm just losing my thought now. I think that something that can happen, I don't know if this is what they mean by psyching themselves out, but sometimes what I see a lot in people when they're trying to get back into like an exercise routine or something is that they compare themselves to their past self when they were like in top shape and exercising, you know, 8 days a week, right? And like all the time. And they're like, why can't I be that person? And it's like, well, because you're not there. You're here in 2020 during a pandemic when things are different. So don't compare yourself to that past person. Let's be here in the present moment where you can get that 5 minutes in. And even if it's not what you wanted it to be, it's still better than nothing.
Yeah. When I come back from a run, I rarely regret it. I'm never like, oh, I wish I hadn't have done that. But on those days when I don't want to go out, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go do a mile and we'll see what happens. And inevitably by the end of that mile, I'm like, well, we can do 2. And then that kind of comes. And like when approaching a hard workout or a longer run, I think sometimes you can do, like you said, like baby steps. There's, you know, that saying like, how do you eat an elephant 1 bite at a time, or, you know, however the saying goes. So I think that's good advice. And I hope, hopefully this person, you know, you don't think of that great big long run or whatever that's coming at the end of the week. You just think of tomorrow's run is going to be this. And then, perhaps you don't psych yourself out for that, ideally.
Baby steps.
Exactly, baby steps.
Work your way up to it.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And also, I really appreciate what you said about not comparing yourself to past performance or especially other people. I feel like I always compare my worst to someone else's best, which is just a disastrous way to approach life. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's just not healthy. Do you have this is my own question, like how do you not do that? I mean, I know that, I can say to not do it and it's just not helpful, but how do you actually stop doing that?
Yeah, well, becoming aware of it in the first place, I used to do that a lot for sure. And it took a lot of practice for me to say, that's not fair. I'm not them and they are not me. My life circumstances are nothing like their life circumstances. You don't know what has allowed them to get to that point, and looking at their situation, you're not taking into consideration all the factors that have contributed to your life circumstances. So I think the biggest way to just help with that is to be aware when you're doing it and just to have a little bit of a conversation with yourself in that moment of like, okay, I'm not them, they're not me. And then to refocus on like, what are some successes that I have? What are some things that I am just killing it in? And take a little stock of all those things, because our brains love to tabulate all the screw ups and mess ups from the day, right? That's what our brains love to do.
And hold on to it and replay those times.
As they can, yeah.
It's not good.
And so we actually have to like strengthen that muscle of like, what did I do well today? And maybe, and that's what I personally, I have a routine at night and in the morning of a little gratitude practice in the morning, and at night I'm taking account of what were my wins for that day. Sometimes, what could I have done better, because we want to grow too. But really strengthening those muscles of my brain to focus on the positive and the things that I have that are going well for me right now.
That's so good. There's a great resource called the 5-Minute Journal that you can get. That's literally that. You take 5 minutes at night, 5 minutes in the morning. It's a few specific questions day after day. I've been doing that for years, not every day, and sometimes I skip months at a time, but it's something that I found really helpful. And I've been trying to do it a lot right now because for me, at least in my situation, every day feels very similar. And it's easy to just like, where did today go? And like, oh, I ignored my kids all day, or I didn't do this, or this happened, or whatever. And so I think finding some way to reflect on that, and hopefully this 12-week period that we're all doing this training program can be, an opportunity to do that, whether it's just reflecting on how did I feel on my run or walk today, or how did I, mentally did I feel during those things. I think this is all wrapped up together. Any final thoughts? We're a little bit over time here, but I could just keep talking to you for another hour. Any final thoughts as we wrap this all up?
I would just say, connect with those things that bring you joy and do that intentionally. And whether that's running or something else during this time, that's what we've got to hold on to. And it can be the smallest little thing. If it's your favorite mug or a cup of tea or whatever that is, just making sure that everyone is intentionally connecting with those things at least once a day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Slys. I appreciate your wisdom, your time, and just giving us the opportunity to ask some questions. So thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here this evening. Be active, have fun, give back. We will see you next week.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.